We are so close to the actual season. I'm bringing you my top 50 overall players for fantasy football that you need to be drafting. And we're starting it off in the S tier. And for me in the S tier, there's 7 direct guys. But starting off with these first 4 guys, we have CMC, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase. And CMC, even with the injury concerns, we did just see Elijah Moore go down for the season. And so you got pretty much not a lack of depth behind CMC. So it's going to be CMC or bust for this 49ers overall offense in the running back room, even if CMC does 10% less than what he did last year. So let's say it's not as amazing as last year. CMC is still worthy of the 101 pick. He is still a league winner. Absolutely have to take him here in the S tier as the first overall player, whether it's standard, whether it's half PPR, or whether it's full PPR. You are taking Christian McCaffrey. Now, these rankings are based on full PPR. So if you are playing in a half PPR or standard format, of course, you're going to be bumping up the running backs in those formats. But the next 3 guys, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase. And I understand there's kind of the debate on the second player overall between CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. CeeDee Lamb had that amazing year last year. Tyreek Hill has kind of been doing this a lot of the time. So you could maybe make the argument that Tyreek Hill is a little safer than CeeDee Lamb off the jump. But I have them both here. I have CeeDee Lamb at the 102, at the 103 I have Tyreek Hill. Now, at the 104 starts to get a little juicy. I go with Jamar Chase, and it's because I have Jamar Chase in my projections as the 104. Well, looking at Jamar Chase, I have him pretty closely ranked to Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. And so I think for you are going to be a little bit worried about the overall production of Jamar Chase. Last year, we can kind of just throw it out the window. We had Joe Burrow get injured. You had a backup quarterback. And you could say maybe the same thing for Justin Jefferson, who I have next in this tier. And you could say to me, well, Caleb, I have Justin Jefferson ahead of Jamar Chase because of what I saw, that I'm not as worried about the quarterback production. You've even talked about it before. I have. But assuming that Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow for a full healthy season, both of them are healthy, and Justin Jefferson has Sam Darnold for a full healthy season, I am still taking the shot on Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson, even though I feel comfortable with Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 4 in fantasy football rankings. Absolutely deep level of wide receiver talent at the top. If you get a top 7, a top 8 pick, you're absolutely loving your life because it's absolutely elite. In this next little gap in the S tier, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan, and Breece Hall. Absolutely electric top 8 players in fantasy football. And I want one of these picks because honestly, as much as I do have my preferences with like CMC and CeeDee Lamb over Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan, these guys all have elite level upside in their own offenses. And I think appropriately, I am still taking in a half PPR or full PPR format, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown over Bijan, over Breece Hall, even though I know how important it is to get a league winning type level running back, how important it is, especially if you're going to be doing a hero RB build, to get a guy like Breece Hall. My issue is when you come back around in the second round, I don't feel as confident in the wide receivers as I think there are some good running back options. So I do like locking down that elite level wide receiver in round 1 to then get that elite level running back in round 2. But for top 8 picks, it feels absolutely great. And rounding out the end of the S tier into the early A tier, I have AJ Brown, Jonathan Taylor, and Puka Nacua. And then I have Garrett Wilson a spot behind Puka Nacua. You could definitely argue that Garrett Wilson should be in the same tier in the S tier. Main reason for me is, like I said, I think with Garrett Wilson, as much as I love him, you see the jersey right behind me, I think it's a more of a projection with Garrett Wilson than it is for a guy like we've seen with Puka Nacua. Jonathan Taylor is going to be an elite level offense for the Indianapolis Colts next to Anthony Richardson. AJ Brown, we've seen him do it before, so there's the solid floor of knowing AJ Brown's probably going to finish somewhere around wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis, but he does have the upside to crack into that top 3 overall. So I think those players, compared to what I think is more of a projection for Garrett Wilson, we've seen the elite level target share. We're just banking on Aaron Rodgers in this year too. So I have Garrett Wilson in the A tier. You let me know down below what you think of these tiers. When we enter the second round territory, things start to get dicey. So after Garrett Wilson, I have Devontae Adams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Nico Collins. Devontae Adams, well, we've seen it. Dude's getting up there in age. So there are the age concerns with Devontae Adams, but he's playing in an offense where he is the clear alpha. We've seen that 150 to 160 targets the last 2 years. Just put it into perspective. I don't care that Gardner Minshew might not be elite. This team is going to be bad, so they're going to have to throw the ball late in games. So give me some Devontae Adams here. Starting off in the A tier, I have Devontae Adams as my overall player 13. My overall player 14 is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs, if I went wide receiver in the first round and I can get Jahmyr Gibbs as my hero running back in the second, that feels absolutely, you're going to have to take him at least at the 202. That's as far as he's been falling in any leagues with me. I like the overall value because I think we were talking about earlier on in this offseason that Jahmyr Gibbs was ahead of Jonathan Taylor in our redraft rankings. The worry is, of course, with Jahmyr Gibbs, is he splitting time with David Montgomery? How are those hamstrings going to hold up? We do like the offensive line, but I think when you're talking about it from a pure realistic workload perspective, Jonathan Taylor just gets the nod based on the fact that he doesn't have to compete with David Montgomery. And then the next guy in this A tier, and I think if you tuned into any content from me over the last 2 weeks, you've heard me say that this second round starts to get a little bit dicey. Between the second round and the third round, there's a lot of values that you could make the argument that a lot of third round guys should be second round guys and vice versa. And Nico Collins kind of starts that tier off for me. I think for me, the argument for Nico Collins is that he's playing with CJ Stroud and an elite level offense. And last year he didn't get the targets, but he still produced on a fantasy football level. So therefore you're like, hey, in this year, he should still produce on a fantasy football level. But then there's those that say Nico Collins, listen, he's got Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. You probably need to push him down your rankings a little bit. I'm worried about the overall targets. I'm worried about him scoring that elite level upside. I'd much prefer to take a shot on someone else. And so this is where I have Nico Collins ranked. I feel pretty good about it, but let me know down below what you think of Nico Collins here in the A tier. And then rounding out this A tier, we have then Drizzy Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. Love the fact that he's getting targeted the ball by Kirk Cousins. I think we're going to see a big uprise for Drake London in this overall offense. And I think you could make the debate of taking Marvin Harrison Jr., who also really hasn't proven anything up to this point because he is a rookie, but he's a high level pedigree rookie. We've never had to take a rookie this early in your fantasy football drafts. So I have them kind of back to back ranked. Listen, I don't have a ton of Marvin Harrison Jr. You see the jerseys behind me. I absolutely love Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's an absolute electric athlete. I think I'm just worried about where that overall ceiling is going to be in year one. I mean, we've seen rookie level wide receivers. We've seen Jamar Chase absolutely break fantasy football. We saw Justin Jefferson absolutely break fantasy football. I think it's always hard to rank him that high because we didn't have to draft him that high in their rookie seasons, but we have to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. this high. So listen, I'm a little bit lower on Marvin Harrison Jr. than others, but I still have him here in the A tier. Then we move on to a little bit of a running back tier with Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, and Kyren Williams. I do have these guys a spot below, of course, like a Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, and CMC. But I do think it is an appropriate value at the end of the second, especially if you took a guy like a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson to then come back around and get a guy like a Saquon, Travis Etienne, and Kyren Williams. Saquon Barkley, honestly, is going a little bit ahead in rankings. I'm a little bit worried about the overall touchdown upside / we've never seen Saquon Barkley be Saquon Barkley since his rookie level season in the NFL. So that is why I have Saquon Barkley kind of ranked down here at the back end of the second. And then we round out the second with Travis Kelce and Jalen Waddle. I want to just address one thing. I think the fantasy football space, we are all worried about the report that came out with Kyren Williams. I'm not scared of Kyren Williams. The fact that he's going to be returning punts, who knows how long that lasts, whether that is week 1, week 2. We see one big hit, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we can't do that to Kyren Williams anymore. I'm a big Blake Corum believer. I know a lot of people in the fantasy space are. I know a lot of people are against Blake Corum because they're like, Sean McVay only likes to use one running back in his offense. Listen, I didn't like Blake Corum scoring on my Ohio State Buckeyes in college, but I don't think we need to worry about that. And then, of course, Travis Kelce, we have to draft him at the 1-7 last year. I'm expecting nothing less than what he did last year, and now we get almost a whole round discount on Travis Kelce. Feels great. And then rounding out the first is going to be Jalen Waddle, who's been Mr. Consistency. I understand the high-level games haven't necessarily been there with Tyreek kind of stealing a lot of the show. Jalen Waddle is a consistent wide receiver. So especially if you're at the turn, if you're able to get a CMC, then you're able to get a Jalen Waddle and then address another position back to back to back. That's what I absolutely love, and that's how I have it currently right now in my rankings. But moving on to the B tier, we started off with 4 guys in the B tier. It's going to be Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans. And we start to get into the third round, and like I said, this kind of starts to be where your team build really starts to happen, where my rankings kind of just get to, ranking. If I went, like I said, if I got like a CD Lamb and then I come back around in the second and I'm able to get a guy like a Kyren or a Jalen Waddle or Travis Kelce, I can then maybe decide to go with a hero RB build with Derrick Henry or Devon Achane. Now, depending on how this kind of falls in your draft, I've seen Derrick Henry, I've seen Devon both go in the second. So like I said, then maybe you're getting one of these receiver values that falls to in my A tier. But I do think Devon is an absolute league winner this year. I don't think it's just hard with the overall upside of, we know he was RB4 on a points per game basis last year, but how is that snap share going to play out in this overall offense for the Miami Dolphins with Raheem Mostert, with Jalen Wright? Derrick Henry, we know who Derrick Henry is, but it's also kind of a shell of Derrick Henry just because he's getting older, but he's in a more efficient offense than he's ever been in his career with Lamar Jackson, with Mark Andrews, with Zay Flowers. Flowers. So I feel very safe having Derrick Henry here in the B tier starting it off. Then we got Brandon Ayuk and Mike Evans as wide receivers. Now, if I'm really asking myself, I have Brandon Ayuk in my rankings a spot ahead of Mike Evans, but I have taken Mike Evans ahead of Brandon Ayuk. I do just think the floor, the safety is with Mike Evans. I think the overall upside is with Brandon Ayuk, which is crazy to say because we have seen Mr. Mike Evans be 1,000-yard, 10 total touchdowns, but Brandon Ayuk is that type of dude. We'll have to see. Deebo Samuel, I have him. Of course, he's going to make this video, but Deebo Samuel is getting older, so that is a concern for me in this overall offense. So let me know what you think of this start to the B tier. The next three guys in this tier are going to be Cooper Kupp, Isaiah Pacheco, Sam Laporta. Cooper Kupp competing with targets with Puka Nacua, but I still think if Cooper Kupp can get healthy, I know he's getting older, you're getting a little bit of an age discount with him here in the B tier. Then we go to Isaiah Pacheco. This is the last of kind of the elite level bell cow running backs that you can kind of argue. I have Josh Jacobs, who's going to be coming up after here with Sam Laporta, but I do think Isaiah Pacheco in the Kansas City Chiefs offense, they do sign Samaje Perine, so there's a little bit of concern. Hey, how's that going to work out? Well, Samaje Perine just got cut from the Broncos, so I'm not concerned about Isaiah Pacheco's overall workload. That feels more like a depth piece. Sam Laporta, a lot of people are going to argue that Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce should be closer in their overall range of ADPs, and in my rankings, I still have Travis Kelce as the clear tight end one this year, and that's how I've been drafting him. Sam Laporta does fall here in the B tier, so let me know what you think of this little blip in the B tier. These next three guys, we got the quarterbacks with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, and then Josh Jacobs. Listen, I think at this point in the draft, you need to start thinking, hey, how am I going to get a points per game advantage over my league mates? And quarterback, while it is super deep this year, I've seen Jordan Love go super late, sometimes in like the 9th or 10th round, and Jordan Love finished as a QB5 on a points per game basis last year. So you're going to be saying to me, well, Caleb, I don't like to take early round QB. Well, in previous years, you had to take Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts in the back end of the second, and they weren't falling past the 301. I've been in plenty of drafts where I've seen Josh Allen fall to the 310, the 311, Jalen Hurts to the 4.2, the 4.4, and I just think it's a little bit of a self-correction that we've done in the fantasy football space that's not needed because of the points per game difference that usually the top three guys in fantasy football give you year after year. Jalen Hurts is playing an improved offense. Josh Allen is going to have to do way more just for the Buffalo Bills to even compete, be in the playoff hunt. So I do like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts both here. These guys are absolute fantasy football players, and you guys know that. You've been drafting them that way. I wouldn't be scared to take an early round QB this year. I've been doing it plenty. It feels absolutely great. And then the next guy in this tier is going to be Josh Jacobs. And when we talk about Josh Jacobs, the one thing that I do want to mention is with AJ Dillon going out with that significant injury, that's going to give a ton more volume to Josh Jacobs. So even if Josh Jacobs, who is getting up there in age, but he did sign that massive contract with the Green Bay Packers, even if he has lost a step, he starts to lose a step, that volume is going to be the king in this Green Bay Packers running attack. So I absolutely love Josh Jacobs here in the B tier. And my last guy in this B tier is going to be Deebo Samuel. And a few weeks ago, I put out my wide receiver rankings. This would have, come out 2 weeks ago, like August 14th. And I'll be completely honest, I had Deebo Samuel at like wide receiver 20, wide receiver 21. And I felt really good about it. Also, the fact that I'm just not a big Deebo Samuel, like talent-wise believer. But if you looked at his overall fantasy football points from the last few years, you'd see that he scored a crap load of touchdowns each and every year. And so I was like, okay, even if for some reason, let's say that touchdown upside goes down this year, I just couldn't see the overall upside. Shout out to one of you who commented on this video and said, hey, Caleb, you might want to check out Vegas. They have San Francisco slotted to score the most points, most touchdowns in 2024 football in the NFL. And I said, okay. So I started doing a little bit of research, started digging a little bit deep, and lo and behold, that commenter was right. I started doing my projections. I realized that I had a little bit of a miscalculation in the overall touchdown upside of the San Francisco 49ers offense. I didn't line it directly with the Vegas. I pulled it down even slightly, but all of a sudden Deebo Samuel went shooting up my ranking, and I said, hey, I made a mistake. So I want to let you guys know that in the end of this B tier, I do have Deebo Samuel because he is super valuable to your fantasy football roster. Have him here, feel great about it. And we're going to move on to the C tier. And we start off this C tier with Chris Olave, Rashad White, Stephon Diggs, Zay Flowers, DJ Moore, Mark Andrews, Alvin Kamara, DK Metcalf. Chris Olave, elite level target getter. Is Derek Carr going to be the starter for the whole season? We'll have to see. I think he's going to get somewhere probably north of 150 to 160 targets. I just, in my projections, it's hard to give him, it's really hard for me because I have him, like I said, around wide receiver 16 projected right now. I give him 152 targets. He can even get more, but how many of those are going to be catchable? That's the real question with Chris Olave. I do think the volume of a guy like Chris Olave is right there and probably should be right next to Mike Evans or Brandon Ayuk. I just, with that quarterback play, can't put him any higher. Rashad White, we saw the ultimate level ceiling with him last year with all those receptions. Can he do it again without Dave Canales? They still have Baker Mayfield, so that's a pro. Do have him here in the C tier. Then we move on to the 3 wide receivers back to back to back. Stephon Diggs, Zay Flowers, and DJ Moore. And if you convince me on any of these guys over another, I wouldn't hate you. Stephon Diggs, I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Houston Texans. A lot of people are going to argue that he's the wide receiver 1. A lot of people are going to argue that he's the wide receiver 3 and that Tank Dell should be ahead of Stephon Diggs. I feel like this is a safe projection. I want as many pieces of this offense as I can get. I don't know which one's going to hit because like I said, I'm high on Nico Collins. I'm pretty high on Stephon Diggs. I feel like I like Tank Dell. I've been drafting him a ton in the 5th. One of them isn't going to work out. That's just probably going to be how it's going to have to be. So I'm just going to take enough of the pie that I'm going to get burned in some leagues. I'm not going to get burned in others. So you take the wide receiver in the Houston Texans offense that you like the best. I like Zay Flowers with, next to Mark Andrews. Think there's elite level upside. They got rid of Odell Beckham Jr. They didn't really draft anyone to bring in to compete with targets with those two, like Zay Flowers. DJ Moore has the best quarterback of his career. We were saying that last year, but this year it's even more true, getting Caleb Williams. But the only difference with DJ Moore is if, of course, he had the best quarterback of his career. We could be putting, DJ Moore as a talent and the situation up there with Drake London and Marvin Harrison Jr. The reason that we're not with DJ Moore is because you got Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen to compete with in the target share. So we'll have to see if DJ Moore can even get close to that 20% target share mark. Because even if he gets 21, 22, he would have to get to that 26 to 27 to feel really ultimately elite. And that would almost have to take an injury to a guy like Keenan Allen, who's been Mr. 100 to 110 targets himself, and then Rome Odunze, who is a top 10 drafted wide receiver. We move on to Mark Andrews, and Mark Andrews has never finished in a full season of football since his second year in the NFL, no lower than tight end 5 on a points per game basis. The fact that this year you get to draft Mark Andrews somewhere between tight end 3 to tight end 4, depending on if you might prefer Trey McBride over Mark Andrews. I don't. I prefer Mark Andrews because I think we've seen the ceiling, we've seen the floor, and I feel very comfortable with both. That's who I have next year in the C tier. Then we move on to Alvin Kamara, who, even though he played in 50% of the snaps last year, he was RB5 on a points per game basis. Dude's absolutely electric. I don't care if they give more touches to Kendre Miller, who is in the doghouse, hasn't been performing well, and or Jamal Williams. Alvin Kamara is still going to be getting the receptions, and similar to Chris Olave, they're the only two guys in this offense that I feel comfortable with. Feels good with Alvin Kamara. And then DK Metcalf, I feel like we've been praying for a DK Metcalf ultimate level breakout since he had those 20 total touchdowns in his sophomore season campaign. That hasn't happened, whether it's been quarterback problems, whether it's been play calling like last year with him and JSN really not performing up to par. I still like taking the shot on DK Metcalf here in the C tier. And rounding out my C tier, we have, like we said, rounding out this C tier, we have Devontae Smith, James Cook, and Trey McBride. Devontae Smith, wide receiver 2 on this Philadelphia Eagles offense with Kellen Moore. I do think there's ultimate level upside here for Devontae Smith, where really in the last, few years, it's really been on a points per game basis without AJ Brown that he's been able to shine. You still have Dallas Goedert to compete with. You got Saquon Barkley now out of the backfield, who is a serious receiving threat. Devontae Smith feels safe, but if you want more upside, I might shy away from Devontae Smith, but in my projections, this is where I have him. Then we got James Cook, who might be, besides Josh Allen, the only for sure thing in this Buffalo Bills offense, as well as Dalton Kincaid. I do like Dalton Kincaid, but I think the value on a guy like James Cook here, like we said, you're able to get James Cook a little bit behind some other running backs like a Rachaad White, like a Josh Jacobs, like an Isaiah Pacheco. I do like the receiving upside. I think I'm worried a little bit about that touchdown upside. And Trey McBride, a lot of people have Trey McBride ahead of Mark Andrews, even probably starting off this tier is where they would have Trey McBride. I understand the Trey McBride love. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in, stealing some of those targets away from Trey McBride hurts his overall upside, even though it is clearly the Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride show in this offense. So let me know what you think of the C tier. Let me know what you would change. And then rounding out my tiers, we have my D tier. And I'll just say this is my quarterback tier. We got Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, all in this tier. And I think you could make the argument that maybe I have Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes shouldn't be 2 tiers lower than Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. I just think that's where the points per game difference is for me with those two over a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Maybe you could argue hey, I'd rather have Patrick Mahomes over Alvin Kamara, DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith, but I do feel confident with Patrick Mahomes leading out this tier. Next guy's going to be Malik Neighbors. Pretty big discount that you're getting in your drafts compared to a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. with Malik Neighbors. I think both of them are set to absolutely produce in fantasy football. The question for Malik Neighbors is how he's going to be able to do with a full season of Daniel Jones compared with Marvin Harrison Jr. with a full season of Kyler Murray. Of course, feel a lot more comfortable with Kyler Murray as the quarterback than Daniel Jones, but we'll have to see how Malik Neighbors does. I do think you're getting a pretty good value on him here. Then we move on to Lamar Jackson. Now you got Derrick Henry in the backfield. It's year 2 in this Todd Todd Monken level offense. Lamar Jackson, if he stays healthy, if his weapons stay healthy, I think Lamar Jackson has huge potential this year. And honestly, I think he's maybe like slightly below Patrick Mahomes, but not by much. Michael Pittman Jr., I've said this for a long time. I am not a huge Michael Pittman Jr. truther, even though a lot of people are going to say he's way too low. If you look at a bunch of different rankings out there in the stratosphere, Michael Pittman Jr. sometimes goes in that Cooper Kupp range, that like in the B tier. And I just can't get there. I just think Michael Pittman Jr., he's had a ton of targets the last few years because there hasn't been enough weapons. And now you add in Jonathan Taylor back fully healthy. You got Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell to compete with in the wide receiver room. We'll have to see how Michael Pittman Jr. does. I still think he's the one. I just don't know how much of a one he is, why I have him here in the D tier. I think the volume will carry him, but where's that overall elite level upside? I think he's more of a safer pick in the 4th to 5th round range. Then we got Amari Cooper with Deshaun Watson. He absolutely performed with Joe Flacco. Can he perform with Deshaun Watson? They bring in Jerry Jeudy. They still have David Njoku. So I think this offense is going to be pretty pass happy, especially the fact that Nick Chubb is going to be on the pup for the first 4 weeks. Sure, Jerome Ford is going to be a good player for those first 4 weeks in fantasy football. I still have Amari Cooper here in the D tier. Then we move on to Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice, clear wide receiver 1, alpha level dog for the Kansas City Chiefs. Book it. Love some Rashee Rice. No suspension is all good things for Rashee Rice, and I think his value just continues to soar up the fantasy football rankings. We then move on to Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. Got both of these quarterbacks back to back. If you like the San Florida CJ Stroud, go CJ Stroud. If you like the high-end Konami code quarterback upside of a guy like Anthony Richardson, where I think if Anthony Richardson plays a fully healthy season, he's like Cam Newton-like, where we're talking about Anthony Richardson kind of returning on QB1 overall value. So if you wait and you don't take an elite level quarterback like a Josh Allen, like a Jalen Hurts, you're able to get some serious value on a guy like Anthony Richardson a little bit later in your draft. And then rounding out this D tier and the top 50 rankings, I got Tank Dell, who I said there's arguments to be made that Tank Dell should be taken above Stephon Diggs, who went into tier above for me. Like I said, these top 50 rankings, this is how I see it right now. Doesn't mean you're going to see it this way. Doesn't mean your league mates are going to see it this way. But I do like Tank Dell. I think, especially if something were to happen to either of the other two guys, Tank Dell is an absolute league winner. There's potential that he's a league winner even without an injury. Tank Dell could be the clear wide receiver 1 and has that connection with CJ Stroud, because who are they going to double? Maybe they're doubling Stephon Diggs. Maybe they're doubling Nico Collins. Trust me, they ain't going to be doubling Tank Dell, and that dude is absolutely talented. T. Higgins, who has been put in a box of injury plagueness over the last few seasons, and then of course last year, even though Jamar Chase was able to kind of have some decent fantasy football weeks with Jake Browning, T. Higgins wasn't. So T. Higgins, hopefully this year, it's a contract year for my guy with the Cincinnati Bengals since he got put on that franchise tag. And the last player in this D tier is going to be Dalton Kincaid for the Buffalo Bills. A lot of exciting stuff for this Buffalo Bills offense, especially Dalton Kincaid. When we talked about getting an elite level tight end, you're having to take him in the 5th round. Sometimes he's going in the back end of the 4th. So if I can lock down one of those top 5 elite level tight ends, that's what I'm trying to do in my draft. Here are the final rankings for my top 50 overall players. Let me know what you think of these down below. Hit that like and subscribe button. On the way to 3,000 subscribers. So I want you here in the community, going to be answering all your start sit questions this season. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.